Chapter 4. What's your game, mate? I just need somewhere to stay, temporarily. And if you don't want me in the shed, well, surely you're not hard-hearted enough to shove me out on the fens when it's snowing again. Flora looked behind her to the open doorway. He was right. The snow was coming down again in soft flurries. Her feet shifted, and she couldn't believe what she was about to say. I would just love to shove you somewhere, Scotty boy. Unfortunately for me, I'm too nice a person. Now, if you stay out here, you do it without the heater. Are you okay with that? Evan looked at her with big, sad puppy dog eyes. That's what she would call them if puppy dogs came with soft powder blues framed with dark chestnut lashes. His technicolor hair was hidden safely under a black knitted cap, and Flora felt a strange little flutter of attraction. With a start, she realised she'd edged closer to him, the two of them standing silently, eyeing each other, and if it lasted much longer, slightly moronically. Your move, Flora. I don't want to impose more than I already have, but I think we both know it's too cold out here for that. Flora twitched her nose. And I suppose you'd tell me if you were a serial killer. The question took Evan by surprise, and he grinned, because her perfectly round face was deadly serious. What happens if I say no? Will you still invite me in? Just don't pull that weird face you do, it freaks me out. What weird face? He looked bemused. The one where you scrunch your forehead up. You look like you've escaped from an asylum. Evan's face lit up with mirth as he realised what she was describing. I waggled my brows at you. Didn't you like it? Damn, I thought the ladies were supposed to love that. Not on you. Maybe you're not doing it right. She put her hand up to forestall him. And before you ask, I don't want you practising it on me either. So if I'm a good boy, can I spend the night with you? He gave her the full benefit of his Scots burr and dipped his head to meet her suspicious brown eyes. Flora scowled. You can spend the night in the spare room, smart-ass. Well, that's exceptionally kind of you. I'm very grateful. Before she could stop him, Evan kissed her, briefly, on the cheek. It was deliberately non-threatening and sweetly old-fashioned. His nose was cold as it touched her skin, and she couldn't stifle the shiver that trickled all the way to her toes. Irrationally, Flora couldn't pull her eyes away as he grabbed his backpack from the bath and slung it over his shoulder. Walking around her, he reached up and pulled the light cord, plunging them back into darkness. Come on, love. I'll clean up in here tomorrow. Flora dithered, then turned and walked back up the garden, pretty sure she was making an enormous mistake. Evan shut the shed and followed close behind, anxious she didn't change her mind before he managed to get through the door. As she pushed the door handle, she spoke softly. Evan, please, whatever else you might think of doing, don't steal from me. I don't own very much, and what I do have I want to keep. Although he felt slightly affronted, for all Flora knew she was inviting a stranger into her home, she had the right to voice her fears. Her honesty was endearingly blunt, and the soft Yorkshire accent seemed to temper the slight insult. He traced a currently uncalloused finger down Flora's cheek. I promise you, and your possessions, are safe with me, Flora. Another arched brow and a throaty were her only response. Flora stepped inside and gestured him in after. An instant swarm of dogs surrounded them, and he scored valuable points when he dropped to his knees, fussing them all liberally. Why do you have so many? They're not all mine, she smiled. I'm employed by Lady Jemima up at the hall. Flora jerked her head towards the barn conversion. The poodles are all rescue cases. The schnauzers are mine. She bent and stroked Riley's head. Did you think I was a crazy dog lady? Not at all. I was just curious. It's a small place for all of you. Watch what you say. You'll remind me there isn't much room for an overnight guest. The warning was gentle, but his presence was making Flora jittery. The kitchen was the largest of the downstairs rooms, but Evan was a big man and he dominated the space, despite being outnumbered by the dogs swarming all over him. It was hard to take a breath when faced with a boatload of charisma, and Flora wasn't sure that she liked it. Evan stood, and Flora's awkwardness magnified. The men she'd dated were mostly not much taller than her, and in the main they'd been distinctly average. They were usually scrawny and made her feel like a heifer, or they were pudgy, soft in the middle from too many nights playing darts at the pub. Everything about Evan was different. For starters, he was a grown-up, and despite his current circumstances, he didn't lack confidence. He smiled at her as her hands took over fussing the dogs, trying not to watch him out of the corner of her eye. Shrugging out of his jacket, one of Evan's firm-looking arms went to his head and pulled off his cap. Something had happened to his hair. The colour had faded to a warm strawberry blonde, and he smelled better. The clothes still needed washing, but those things that had first offended Flora were dangerously absent. This Evan was a different proposition altogether, stood here in her kitchen, and like an idiot, she'd invited him to sleep over. "Don't you have anywhere to stay at all?" Evan paused, hoping to keep the number of lies to a minimum. It would be so easy to tie himself in a knot. "I don't own a home, and I don't have enough cash to pay rent. Nobody sleeps in a shed without good reason, Flora." From her face, he could see he hadn't entirely been convincing. There had been a slight shift in his eyes as he spoke, and a flush rose on his fair-skinned jaw. The smattering of tawny stubble couldn't quite camouflage the reaction. "No, I suppose they don't. Are you hungry? I could cook you something." "I am, but it's late and I don't want to keep you up if you need to sleep." "I don't mind. I always stay up late. Will scrambled eggs do? I haven't exactly been shopping or had a chance to explore the village. I was going to look around tomorrow." "Flora, I'm so hungry I could eat one of your poodles. Eggs would be great." They settled into an awkward silence as Flora shuffled about, finding a pan and whisking some eggs. With her body turned in profile, Evan was free to resume his study. All mussed up and sleepy-looking, he was surprised to find the girl somewhat ravishing. With her apple cheeks and luminous skin, she looked born to country living. The jaw-length bob and angular fringe had curled around the edges and sported an elasticated band balanced magically on her brow. She was what Evan would call a bonny girl, with the optimum amount of padding. He couldn't imagine finding any stray bony bits on Flora. Her style was relaxed with not an ounce of pretension, just a chunky knit jumper and an old pair of jeans. On her feet were two endearingly different socks. The contrast between her naturally red lips, dark hair and pale skin put Evan in mind of Snow White. If she'd been sneaking a few extra sandwiches, of course. It wasn't hard to imagine some lucky landowner coming home from a long day and squeezing the life out of her. He might try that himself if she ever stopped bristling. Evan's thoughts shifted as a mountain of deep yellow eggs and hot buttered toast arrived. And tea, a big mug of glorious tea. He couldn't believe how much he'd missed it. He ate like a man possessed and then immediately felt like a dick. The memory of the people he'd met in London still plaguing him. Yet here he sat, warm and full, a fiendishly lucky opportunist, back indoors in less than a week. Flora appeared over his shoulder before he had the chance to grow maudlin. "I'm going to turn in. Do you want to see the spare room?" Evan nodded, draining the last of his cup with an appreciative gulp. He stowed his guilt for examination later. Maybe he'd have to do something useful when all of this was over, show the homeless crisis some proper respect. Nudging dogs out of the way, Flora showed him how to open the baby gate. "To be honest, I thought it might be easier for me to step over. My hands are too big for fiddly catchers." Flora wished he hadn't reminded her. She'd already noticed earlier how strong and capable they looked, knew that the same veins would travel upwards, growing more pronounced over his forearms. She tried to sound unaffected. Well, whatever, just don't trip over. I can't afford to be sued by one of those companies that advertise on TV. Evan laughed and stepped over the puny white barrier, proving he could accomplish it easily. He also gave Flora a flash of the inseam of his jeans, straining around his crotch. She flushed a charming shade of beetroot and made a mental note not to watch him doing that again. As long as he was here, she couldn't be thinking about his tackle. With that thought slightly ominous in her head, Flora wondered why she was so worried. There was no way Evan was staying any length of time, a night or two at the most. She wasn't even sure she was allowed guests. Moving upstairs, she pointed out the little box room, overfilled by the cosy daybed. It's probably not big enough for you, but I'm sure it's better than a dog bath. Will you manage okay? Better than okay. It looks like heaven right about now. Flora looked up at him, a little uncomfortable with their current proximity. The bathroom's right there, but me first if you don't mind, and I'll see you in the morning. Have you got anywhere to be tomorrow? She hoped like hell he had, because what would she do with him underfoot? You probably won't see me first thing unless you're a very early riser. I've got a couple of days' trial at the stud farm, a little further on past Brigley Hall. They want me there for 6 or so. That's great, Flora interrupted. You'll be gone then. Did you want to come back here? A grin pricked up one corner of his mouth. I'd like that, Flora. You've been terribly kind. I meant what I said, though. I don't want to cause a problem. On the rack in the kitchen there's a key with a chip of red paint. It's the spare for the front door. You could take that in case I'm not at home. You're sure? Nerves made her a little snappy. No, I'm bloody not. But I won't be happy knowing you might be out there, freezing to death when I could have done something about it. She sighed helplessly. Make sure you take care of the key and try not to let anybody see you coming and going. Do we have a deal? Evan considered Flora's face. That's more than I hoped for, sweetheart. I'm not sure I would be as gracious in your position. I don't know what else to do, she shrugged. It's not a situation I've been in before, if you've nowhere else to go. Well, look, don't come back if you don't want to, but it won't be because I didn't offer to help. Evan checked his wristwatch. It was past midnight. He reached out and slid a warm palm around Flora's neck, his thumb resting on her collarbone. She flinched, her dark eyes widening, and he distracted her by using his other hand to make a little space in her fringe. His lips brushed her forehead gently. As Evan straightened up, he repositioned the wandering headband so it sat further towards the crown of her head. Flora's eyes flickered with something that was either confusion or nerves. He didn't know her well enough to guess. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm not trying it on. Something in Evan's wicked gleam had Flora hearing the implied yet. I'm just grateful and happy St. Patrick's Day. Her eyes softened enough so that he caught a glimpse of those dimples. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Evan. Realising she was still staring, she turned and scurried into the bathroom, throwing a harried "good night" over her shoulder. Good night, Flora, Evan whispered, trying to shut himself in the room. Closing the door unbalanced him, and he toppled onto the bed, rolling onto his side. It was hard not to picture her getting washed and undressed. She was brushing her teeth and attempting to spit quietly. It made him smile, wondering what she must be thinking. Flora returned below, crooning endearments in her funny little accent. Bo Peep was herding her flock of sheep. When she finally retired for the night, she wasn't alone, and Evan wondered if that was for protection or habit. He got up to use the toilet and, mindful of being a good house guest, put the seat back down afterwards. He decided to shower, not wanting to wake his hostess in the morning. As he selected a clean towel from the rack, he breathed in the sweet floral scent. God bless women and their use of fabric conditioner. He felt better than he had in days, with just a wash, a full belly and a warm spot to lay his head. Maybe he wasn't too old to learn a little humility. Flora slept heavily, waking at 6:30 to find Evan already gone. She peeked into the spare room to make certain, surprised to see he'd made a reasonably good job of straightening the bed. Even the bathroom was tidy, with a single damp towel folded over the radiator to dry. Fillmore and Riley followed her as if co-inspecting. It seemed like Evan had been remarkably thoughtful, trying to keep his impact minimal, and Flora had to admit she was impressed. She took a quick shower, trying not to think about the naked man in the tub before her, and dragged on some old clothes, heading downstairs to walk the dogs. Trike was on restricted exercise, so she kept him in the house while she walked the rest of the pack. She stuck to the driveway again, feeling a little twinge of anxiety when she realised she was following a set of sizable male boot prints. The ground seemed to have frozen over some time after he made the tracks. She would have to remind him about using the fen path, but hopefully no one would have spotted him out so early. When she got home, it took her a good half hour to dry everybody's legs and tummies, and then she fed them all, including herself. After breakfast, Flora took Trike and drove the car up to the hall. She'd mentioned to Siobhan about making use of the treadmill just until the weather cleared up, and she'd agreed it shouldn't be a problem. As Flora got closer, she found a brand new Audi blocking the gateway, looking as if it had taken a corner too fast and swerved. The front end had a nasty-looking scrape from the gatepost, and a mobile repairman was already at work. Flora was in two minds whether to call in, but at some point she was going to need those vehicles to move. The Jaguar Siobhan used was parked, so she decided to knock on the door and say hi. Flora probably shouldn't have been surprised when the door was answered not by Siobhan, but by a tall, almost brutally thin blonde, a woman with aggressively attractive bone structure and hard hazel eyes. She was dressed in expensive loungewear and greeted Flora and Trike with the same kind of look Cruella de Vil reserved for Dalmatian puppies, the newborn ones that hadn't gained their spots yet. "I have to assume you must be Frida." A bony hand came out and Flora took it reluctantly, trying to shake confidently, without bruising herself on the knuckle-duster diamond the woman was sporting. "Flora," she corrected. Yes, sorry. I didn't mean to call so early. I was hoping to have a quick word with Siobhan. It's not convenient this morning. I've just arrived home and the fucking drive was a mess. She's busy putting a rocket up the groundsman for me, and in future you need to pre-arrange a visit." "Right, that's fine. Perhaps I can have her schedule something in a few weeks. Then you can advise me of your progress with the rescue." "You might have come in, I suppose, but now I've finally managed to get those dogs out of the hall, I won't risk cross-contamination again." She looked pointedly at Trike as if he were a carrier monkey. Flora gave her employer similar regard, knowing if it were anybody else she would have happily got in their face for precisely this kind of attitude. It was dangerous, but she was already thinking about the poodles as her dogs, and nobody slighted her dogs and got away with it. "Okay, Lady Jemima," Flora tried desperately not to grit her teeth. "If you'll tell Siobhan, I'll be in touch after the dogs have seen the vet." "Of course, but remember to watch those expenses. I don't want the rescue to break even, Frida. It has to flourish and have a healthy bank balance." Lady Jemima exchanged one disdainful look for another. The current one seemed to question Flora's capability. "If I manage to remember, I'll give Siobhan your message." "Thanks. And would it be okay to move?" Flora stalled as she found the door slammed in her face. "Bloody hell, Siobhan. Talk about avoiding full disclosure. Wasn't that a 2-stone bundle of fun, Trikey? Ruddy bitch. If no one was looking, we could both go pee on her tyres." Flora had a quick look around to see if the repairman was watching, and executed a 2-finger salute at the door. She turned on her heel and had stomped 50 yards down the drive before she realised two things. Trike had to hop in double time to keep up, and she'd forgotten about her car. Shit. Sorry, Trike, I just can't stand rude buggers like her. Where does she get off being mean just because she can be? Tell me that, baby. Hey, what do you think? Trike looked at her as if to say, Are you freaking crazy, lady? Pick me up already. Flora was even crosser when she carried him back to the car, realising she'd have to reverse her way down the drive. It was single track, and there was no feasible way to turn in front of Brigley Hall. Flora couldn't drive backwards to save her life, so by the time she returned to the sanctuary of her little cottage, she had pieces of hedge stuck in her wing mirror, and Trike had started drooling from all the weaving side to side. Barging into the house, she finally managed to unhinge her locked jaw. What she really wanted to do was pick up the phone and have a rant at Siobhan. Instead, she picked up the phone and tried to calmly explain to the vets that she needed to reschedule her appointments. A couple of hours later, Flora struggled into the clinic for the first of her slots. Trike's lead in one hand, with Herbie wedged under the opposite armpit. He'd seen fit to dig his heels in with that inbuilt reaction to, shit, it's the vets. Fiona, Brian and Hartley's receptionist, quickly jumped up and got the door for her. Hi, I heard in the pub there was a new tenant in the lodge cottage. You must be the lucky lady who got Mrs. Smith's extra poodles. Mrs. Smith? It didn't click for a minute who she was referring to. Oh, I'm sorry, Fiona drawled sarcastically. I mean Lady Jemima Gartside Smith's extra poodles. She of the title arriving straight from WeNightAnything.com. Flora found the frustration of her morning easing rapidly, the confirmation of her suspicions teasing a grin to her lips. Is that true? Only the name of the company. Up until a year ago, she was plain old Mrs. Smith. She's not even that officially because she's been divorced a couple of years or so. Flora stuck her hand out. Well, I'm plain old Flora Marston, and I think I'm very glad to meet you. Fiona Nielsen. She laughed, returned the shake, and petted Trike. I'm glad to see this guy's looking better. I cried my eyes out when they first brought him in. Flora shuddered. I'm glad I wasn't here. I know I'm supposed to be running a rescue, but I'm a bit of a wimp when it comes to animal cruelty. I'm not sure how I would have dealt with it. Probably veered between emotional wreck or pissed and dangerous. I'm not sure which. Fiona smiled sadly. I've seen some awful stuff, but I wasn't prepared for that. It was one of the worst things I've seen since I started here. Mr. Bryant came out and called for Herbie before retreating into his examining room. If I'm free when you come back for your second appointment, I'll have a quick word. There's something I think you should know. Fiona glanced back to make sure nobody could hear. Okay, Flora replied, concern mixing with confusion. But when she came back an hour later with the second set of dogs, Fiona was more harried. She consulted her monitor and booked Benny, Parsley and Daphne in for neutering the following Friday. A few clients had arrived and the phone started ringing off the hook, meaning she wasn't really free to speak. But as Flora left, Fiona followed her to the door, holding it open with her shoulder. After his operation, when Siobhan first collected Trike for the rescue, I could swear that dog already knew her. I don't understand what you mean, Flora found herself mimicking Fiona, glancing about for eavesdroppers. I mean that Trike, or whatever his original name was, well, maybe he was one of Mrs. Smith's own dogs. And if so, how did he end up on the side of the road fighting for his life? But wouldn't he have been on file here? Not necessarily. Not if she bought him as an adult dog and he never needed any treatment. He had a small wound where there might have been a microchip. Flora pulled Fiona outside the surgery with her. I can maybe believe that of Lady Jemima, but I like Siobhan. I don't want to think she was involved in some kind of plot. I'm just telling you my opinion, but if I were you, I'd keep an open mind. Trust no one. Not at Brigley Hall barn conversion, anyway. That's another load of nonsense right there. Fiona stooped and petted the three patiently waiting poodles. You should come check out the pub sometime. Meet some of the locals. We do have some normal people living in Brigley Prior. Flora nodded, pondering what she'd been told. Yeah, I'm sure I will. Bye. See you on Friday. Driving home through the village, Flora wondered if any of it was true, and what she could do about it anyway. She stopped and had a browse in the post office, buying something for tea and making a mental note to find the nearest supermarket and farm shop. Still daydreaming down the driveway, Flora had forgotten the fact that she had a strange man living with her. Parking up and dying to go to the toilet, she let herself in the front door, and the dogs bounded forward to greet each other. Abandoning them for a minute, she ran upstairs and pushed open the bathroom door without thinking. Flora choked on the hefty gulp of air she inhaled, trying desperately to process the vision in front of her. "Flora! Jesus Christ! I thought you were out." Flora's eyes popped out of her head. She turned her back on Evan and clapped her hand over her eyes, trying to black out what she'd just witnessed. "Is that my ruler?" she yelled at him, incredulous. Evan looked at the item in his hand as he tucked himself away and zipped his jeans up with the other. Yes, sorry. I found it downstairs." "You just chanced upon a ruler and thought, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll run upstairs and measure my willy. Even better, I'll do it in a bathroom with no lock on the door and a woman I hardly know coming home any minute." "I know it seems weird." "Really?" she squeaked. "I thought blokes got over this when they were about 12 or something. God, I cannot believe I just witnessed a grown man doing that. Have you put it away yet?" "Yes," he laughed unashamedly. "At least you caught the recumbent measurement a few minutes earlier and I was in the middle of the vertical assessment." "Ew, that is disgusting. Why are you laughing, you great big pervert? And what are you doing home yet? What the hell's wrong with your eyes? God, I thought I was having a weird day before I booked a seat for the penis pantomime." Flora waved her hand between the two of them. She snatched the plastic ruler out of his hand and smacked his biceps with it, making Evan yelp. "I must be crazy letting you in my home. Now, will you please get out, because I almost just wet my knickers. Go wash your hands and sterilise this thing with some bleach. I'll never draw straight lines again, not with visions of willies prancing through my brain." Evan had the decency to blush as he stepped past Flora and took the ruler out of her hand. He tried to hold it in and then decided that he couldn't, and an almighty howl of laughter bellowed out of him. The noise startled the dogs and they began barking hysterically. Flora, now a delightful shade of beetroot, huffed and puffed before slamming the door in his face. Evan had been having his own kind of shitty day, but anyway he looked at it, that was pretty funny. "Are you going to tell me what happened?" It was 7 o'clock, and Flora and Evan were chilling on the sofa, both sipping their second can of lager apiece. Flora was trying to wheedle out of him why he got sent home early, and what had given him red eyes and a runny nose. She felt sure no explanation would justify Evan's descent into penis appraisal. "It turns out I'm allergic to horses." "Really? How come you didn't know that? You're not that young. Haven't you ever come across a horse before? Never ridden a horse?" "I've been near horses, Flora, but I've never had cause to be urinated on by a horse. And while we're discussing age, I'm not ancient. I'm 33. How old are you?" 26. "Geez, you don't look it. You look about 18. It's good to know I'm not about to be a cradle robber, though." "You wish, and stop stalling. Back to the horse wee. How did you manage to make a horse pee on you?" "Well, it's a stud farm, right? I was supposed to be mucking out, but they were short-handed, and I might have slightly exaggerated my experience. So this mare arrives in season unexpectedly, and they tell me to lead her out, and then stand to the side while they arrange her into this thing they use for the, act." Evan scratched his stubbly jaw and sighed. "I was only supposed to steady her hind end, and something I'm generally capable of with women. Well, I wasn't paying attention, was I? Because who in their right mind stares at a lady horse's love flower? Anyway, they brought out this bloody great big stallion, and then, whether it was fright or excitement, she let rip. And the wind blew just right, and I was smack in the firing line. It was horrible. It shot me right in the eye." Flora pressed her lips together, doing her best not to laugh. His pained Scots accent made him even more comical. "After that, I couldn't stop sneezing and my eyes all swelled up. Then they got seriously hacked off because the stallion took a huff and not one bastard had an antihistamine. That's when they told me to push off and come back tomorrow. Flora mopped at her teary eyes, snorting without apology. I'm sorry. Honestly, I am. Only I have a bad habit of laughing at other people's accidents. Well, after I walked home, I couldn't stand the burning in my eyes and went looking to see if you had any tablets. I wasn't prying. I only looked in the kitchen drawers. But then I found the ruler and got a bit waylaid. Ah, of course. Now I can see how that explains everything. The connection between the two incidents is obvious, Flora exclaimed sarcastically. What a load of old tripe. It's the truth, he protested. He felt disgruntled. It was miserable being all itchy and unable to relax. So yes, he went looking for some tablets, but in the same spot he found the ruler, he discovered Flora had a different kind of tablet. And being a trusting soul, it wasn't password protected. He'd had a quick flick through the home pages, but it was nothing compared to Ella's cornucopia. It was mainly crime thrillers and spy novels. She had a thing for lone wolves, it seemed. But there were a few romances. The obligatory 50 Shades, featuring the smuggest of the grey-eyed bastards, and a handful of other racy novels. Evan had a skim through the chapters looking for the naughty bits. It confirmed a previously held summation 3 times over and in imperial measurements. When it came to romantic fiction, the hero wasn't the hero unless he was packing at least 8 inches. In fact, if you went by most of Evan's studies, 8 inches was distinctly average and nothing to write home about. Since there was no way he would ever risk Ella walking in and re-examining his equipment, Evan didn't have the chance to compare himself for contrast. So when he saw that ruler, well, it just proved a little too inviting. Evan stood in Flora's bathroom, cock in hand and thankfully flaccid, as she walked in and nearly bit off her tongue. The smug reaction he'd had on discovering he had a comfortable 8 3/4 inches, when he really pulled, failed to dissipate when he saw Flora's hastily disguised look of admiration. He took a swig of beer and shrugged his shoulders. You're right, I'm bullshitting. It just seemed like a fun thing to do. I'm a man. We get bored and do inexplicable stuff. But my question is, did you like what you saw? Just like that, the light-hearted atmosphere thickened. Flora gulped and looked at him with startled mocha eyes. Evan was almost equally surprised. When the words exited his lips with the barest of filters, he thought a joke was his only intention. His ears didn't concur. The tone of delivery was a come-on, and the idea made the rest of his body feel serious.